Charlotte stood frozen at the altar, her heart racing as the whispers of the crowd grew louder. This wasn't how her life was supposed to be, marrying a beggar, humiliated in front of everyone she knew. But just as the vows were about to be spoken, Nathaniel looked her in the eye and said something that left everyone in the room speechless. Veronica's smug smile disappeared in an instant, and what followed shattered the entire illusion she had built for years. The grand wedding hall was filled with opulence, yet Charlotte stood at the altar, her face marked with desolation. The delicate fabric of her white dress fluttered softly, as if mocking the weight of her burden. She could feel every eye in the room on her, yet none of them saw the pain she carried. Her hands trembled slightly as she held onto the bouquet, her grip tight, as if it were the only thing tethering her to the ground. From behind her, the camera focuses on Charlotte's small, fragile frame against the grandiosity of the hall. The over-the-shoulder shot reveals Nathaniel, the disheveled man in worn clothes, standing nervously at the altar. His eyes, filled with confusion and humility, met hers briefly, a silent plea of understanding passing between them. She could feel the world closing in around her as Veronica watched from the side, her eyes gleaming with triumph. The tension in the room was suffocating. Veronica's presence loomed over the scene, her smile never wavering. She stood tall in an elaborate dress, the embodiment of control. She knew she had won. The gleam in her eyes showed no remorse, only satisfaction as she watched Charlotte being forced into a fate she had orchestrated. The weight of her manipulation filled the air, leaving Charlotte with the feeling that her life was no longer her own. Charlotte's childhood was filled with moments of joy, but also deep sorrow. As a young girl, she idolized her father, a man of strength and wisdom who shaped her world. However, those happy days were cut short when her father passed away suddenly. The memory of the day she learned of his death was etched in her heart, a vivid scene of confusion, pain, and disbelief that no child should endure. As the years passed, Veronica entered Charlotte's life, not as a supportive figure, but as a woman intent on controlling everything around her. Charlotte's once warm home, filled with memories of her father, now felt cold and unfamiliar. Veronica's influence spread quickly, overshadowing everything Charlotte had cherished. Charlotte's relationship with Veronica became strained from the start. Veronica's manipulative and controlling nature left Charlotte feeling more like a guest in her own home. The power dynamics were clear. Veronica was in charge, and Charlotte, though still a part of this luxurious life, was treated as inferior. The house they lived in was magnificent, a sprawling mansion filled with everything one could ever desire. Yet for Charlotte, it was a prison. The grandeur of the place only served to highlight how small and powerless she felt within its walls, a stark contrast between the luxury around her and the isolation she experienced. Every corner of the house reminded her of what she had lost. The once vibrant and loving environment her father had created had been replaced by an air of oppression. Charlotte's childhood home, now ruled by Veronica, became a symbol of all that had gone wrong. Charlotte stood in the grand living room, her heart pounding as she gathered the courage to confront Veronica. She couldn't let this marriage happen. Her voice was soft but steady as she pleaded with Veronica, hoping for a glimpse of humanity in the woman who now controlled her life. Veronica, seated elegantly in her luxurious armchair, barely acknowledged Charlotte's words. Her cold green eyes scanned Charlotte with a look of disdain. There was no trace of compassion, only calculated indifference as she let Charlotte speak, knowing full well that her decision was final. Charlotte's desperation grew, her tone shifting from calm reasoning to pleading. She stood before Veronica, hands clasped together, begging her to reconsider. She spoke of her late father's wishes and her own desire for freedom. But deep down, she knew this was a battle she was unlikely to win. Veronica's response was swift and cutting. She stood, towering over Charlotte with an air of superiority. Her words were sharp as she reminded Charlotte of her place, making it clear that this marriage was happening, whether she liked it or not. Veronica's coldness was palpable, and Charlotte's hope began to crumble under the weight of her words. With a chilling smile, Veronica leaned in close, her voice low and threatening. She told Charlotte that if she didn't comply, the consequences would be dire. Charlotte was trapped, and there was no escape. Her heart sank as the reality of her situation set in. There was no way out. Charlotte, her hands trembling, managed to sneak a message to Olivia. She hoped her friend would understand the gravity of the situation and come to her aid. The fear of being caught was overwhelming, but Charlotte knew she had no other choice. Olivia, always a loyal friend, read the message with a sense of urgency. However, before she could take any action, Veronica had already intercepted it. Charlotte's heart sank when she saw the icy smirk on Veronica's face as she held the intercepted message. Olivia confronted Veronica, trying to reason with her and offering to help in any way possible, but Veronica was unyielding. The power imbalance was clear as Veronica reminded Olivia of the consequences of getting involved in matters that didn't concern her. Olivia felt the heavy burden of Veronica's manipulation and realized that helping Charlotte would not be as simple as she hoped. The weight of Veronica's threats loomed over her, leaving Olivia paralyzed with fear. Veronica then turned her attention back to Charlotte, looming over her with a cruel expression. She stood tall, asserting her dominance, and made it painfully clear that any further attempts at rebellion would lead to consequences far worse than Charlotte could imagine. Nathaniel appeared for the first time, a figure shrouded in mystery. His worn clothes hung loosely on his frail frame, and his disheveled hair barely concealed the intense expression in his warm brown eyes. Despite his rugged appearance, there was something unusual about him that immediately caught Charlotte's attention. As Veronica announced Nathaniel as the chosen groom, his body language was calm, almost too composed for someone in his situation. He gave nothing away, but his subtle glances and quiet movements hinted that there was more to him than met the eye. Charlotte couldn't shake the strange feeling that something was off. She watched him closely, observing the small details. The way his eyes lingered on certain people in the room, the tight grip of his hands, as if holding back a secret. It unsettled her, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Each gesture from Nathaniel, though small, seemed deliberate. He moved with a quiet grace that felt out of place for someone in such tattered clothing. His presence, although understated, carried an undeniable weight. As Nathaniel's eyes met Charlotte's for a brief moment, she felt a chill. There was a hidden intensity in his gaze, something that suggested he wasn't just a helpless beggar. Yet, despite her suspicions, Charlotte remained unable to decipher his true intentions. Olivia had managed to come up with a plan to help Charlotte escape from the oppressive grip of Veronica. They whispered in secret, their words filled with hope as they plotted a late-night escape, hoping to avoid detection. But their hopes were shattered when Veronica, with her sharp intuition and ever-present surveillance, discovered the plan. Just as Olivia was about to put it into motion, Veronica intervened, her presence looming large and inescapable. Charlotte's heart sank as she watched Veronica confront Olivia. All their hopes of escaping crumbled in an instant. Veronica's eyes bore into them, cold and unyielding, reminding Charlotte of the control she had over their lives. Nathaniel, observing from a distance, seemed strangely out of place in this moment. Though his role was unclear, there was a flicker of empathy in his eyes as he watched Charlotte's hopes crumble. Was he truly the enemy? From above, Veronica observed Charlotte like a hawk watching its prey. The feeling of being constantly watched, constantly controlled, overwhelmed Charlotte. She felt smaller than ever, under the crushing weight of Veronica's control. As the wedding day loomed closer, Charlotte felt her hope slipping away. The weight of her fate pressed on her every moment, with no escape in sight. Each passing day deepened her despair, her future becoming bleaker as the thought of the impending marriage suffocated her. Veronica, ever the master of control, didn't miss an opportunity to publicly humiliate Charlotte. In front of wealthy guests and influential figures, she made Charlotte feel small, powerless, and unworthy. Each word cut deep, amplifying the sense of helplessness Charlotte already felt. The humiliation weighed heavily on Charlotte. Her heart ached, and her mind raced, trying to find a way out of this nightmare, but there was none. She could feel the walls closing in, her dreams slipping further and further out of reach. Veronica's cruelty was relentless. The guests laughed as she reduced Charlotte's dignity to nothing, making it clear that there would be no mercy, no salvation. The laughter echoed in Charlotte's mind, reinforcing her belief that she was truly trapped. Alone, Charlotte stood before a mirror, her reflection showing not the vibrant young woman she once was, but someone defeated. Her deep blue eyes, once full of hope, now glistened with despair as she faced the harsh reality of her future. Nathaniel's demeanor shifted subtly in his conversations with Charlotte. During their late-night talks, he began to drop small hints about his past. He mentioned places and events that didn't match the life of a homeless man. His eyes, usually calm and reserved, held a depth that spoke of experiences Charlotte couldn't quite place. She listened carefully, her curiosity growing with each conversation. One evening, Nathaniel absent-mindedly fiddled with a small, worn object in his pocket. Charlotte caught a glimpse of it, a signet ring with an intricate family crest. It was out of place for someone of his supposed background. As he tried to conceal it, Charlotte's suspicion deepened. Something about Nathaniel wasn't adding up. The more they talked, the more Charlotte began to see Nathaniel's inconsistencies. His knowledge of high society, his articulate speech, and the occasional references to people in positions of power hinted at a life far removed from the streets. She started to piece together the puzzle, but something still eluded her. That night, as they sat under the dim light of a street lamp, Charlotte confronted Nathaniel gently. "You're not who you say you are you?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Nathaniel hesitated, his expression conflicted, but didn't deny it. The truth was there, just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel was hiding something much larger than she first imagined. There was a story behind his eyes, a history he was reluctant to share. But she was determined to find out who Nathaniel really was, even if it meant unearthing secrets she wasn't prepared for. Charlotte, determined not to remain passive, decided to dig deeper into Nathaniel's past. She had a feeling there was more to his story than he let on, and the mystery surrounding him gnawed at her. She began her investigation cautiously, revisiting conversations and recalling the subtle hints Nathaniel had given. She knew she couldn't do it alone, so she turned to Olivia for help. Olivia, always the loyal friend, was quick to join Charlotte in her quest for the truth. Together, they started piecing together fragments of information, researching places and names that Nathaniel had mentioned. The more they uncovered, the more they realized that Nathaniel's past was tangled with secrets. They spent late hours discussing their findings, each new discovery deepening the mystery. As they sat in Charlotte's small apartment, surrounded by notes and articles, they exchanged their thoughts, trying to form a coherent plan. Olivia's brow furrowed as she read aloud from a page of research. "This could be a key piece," she said, her hazel eyes filled with determination. Charlotte nodded, her deep blue eyes fixed on the papers in front of her. She wasn't going to stop until she had answers. "We need to be careful," Charlotte said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. She knew that uncovering the truth about Nathaniel could bring unforeseen consequences. But she also knew she couldn't walk away now. There was too much at stake and too many questions left unanswered. With Olivia's unwavering support, Charlotte felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they would get to the bottom of Nathaniel's secret, no matter where it led them. Their resolve was strong, but the path ahead was far from clear. Olivia had been a loyal friend throughout the investigation, but with each failed lead, her enthusiasm began to wane. She sat across from Charlotte, her expression tired and frustrated. "I don't know if we're doing the right thing anymore," she muttered. The constant dead ends were taking a toll on her confidence. Charlotte, sensing the change in Olivia's tone, felt the weight of discouragement settle heavily on her. "We've come so far, Olivia. We can't give up now," Charlotte pleaded, but her voice lacked the conviction she had once held. Olivia's doubt had triggered her own insecurities, and for a brief moment, she wondered if they had indeed been chasing a futile cause. But Charlotte couldn't afford to believe that. She had put too much of herself into finding the truth about Nathaniel. The tension between them grew, and Olivia stood up suddenly, shaking her head. "I just don't think this is worth it anymore," she said, her voice sharper than usual. She started to walk toward the door, the distance between them now both physical and emotional. Charlotte watched, her heart sinking as she realized she might be losing the one person who had been by her side through everything. As Olivia walked away, Charlotte felt more alone than ever. The silence left in the wake of their argument was suffocating. She stood frozen, unsure whether to call Olivia back or to let her go. The room felt colder without her friend's presence, and Charlotte's sense of isolation deepened. Her mind swirled with thoughts of abandonment, and she struggled to maintain hope. Watching Olivia's retreating figure, Charlotte whispered to herself, "I can't do this alone." Yet in that same moment, a small voice inside reminded her that she had no choice but to press on, even if it meant facing the unknown without her closest ally. Charlotte sat in silence, the weight of her recent choices heavy on her shoulders. She thought about everything she had done, each decision she had made, and for the first time, she wondered if she had made the right ones. The endless fight to uncover the truth seemed to be draining her of all her strength. The idea of walking away, of letting go, started to feel more and more appealing. Was it time to give up? The door creaked open, and Nathaniel stepped inside. His presence was calm, steady, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling within Charlotte. He sat beside her, his warm brown eyes searching hers for a sign of what was troubling her. "You're stronger than you think," he said, his voice quiet but filled with an unspoken strength. She sighed deeply, turning away slightly, feeling the exhaustion of it all. "I don't know if I can keep going," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, a woman on the verge of giving up. Nathaniel leaned forward, his posture soft but determined. "You've come this far. The answers you seek are closer than you think. You just have to hold on a little longer," he encouraged, his tone gentle but firm. His words carried a weight that Charlotte hadn't expected, and for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Charlotte remained silent for a moment, contemplating his words. She knew there was truth in what he said, but doubt still lingered in her heart. Could she really continue on this path? Could she trust herself to see it through? As Charlotte sits reflecting on her situation, subtle realizations begin to emerge. She remembers moments with Nathaniel. His words and actions now seem loaded with meaning she hadn't noticed before. His calm encouragement, his insistence that she keep going, begins to echo in her mind. Slowly, she starts piecing together these small, almost unnoticeable clues. The things he said, the way he looked at her, now carry a deeper significance. Nathaniel knew more than he let on. Flashbacks of earlier interactions with Nathaniel play in her mind. His words that once seemed casual now reveal themselves as deliberate. She recalls a time when he gently hinted at a truth she didn't fully grasp. His seemingly random mentions of a shared past, his quiet confidence in the face of uncertainty, all pointed to something bigger that she had overlooked. Charlotte's breath catches as the puzzle starts to fit together. Another memory comes to the forefront, a small gesture Nathaniel made when they were speaking near the city square. At the time, it felt insignificant, a simple nod toward a passing car. Now, it feels as if that nod was a silent signal. Something he was trying to tell her without speaking, something she missed. How could she have been so blind to all these signs? As she replays these moments, a sense of urgency begins to rise within her. It's all starting to make sense, but she's still unsure of the full picture. Nathaniel's cryptic comments and thoughtful silences. Each one had been a clue, a breadcrumb leading her toward the truth. But what is that truth? What is Nathaniel hiding? She stands up abruptly, her heart racing. Charlotte knows she needs to confront him to get to the bottom of this. There's no more time for confusion. She must understand the full story, and Nathaniel is the key. Veronica stands in her luxurious study, her green eyes burning with fury as she clutches a stack of papers detailing Charlotte's secret investigations. Charlotte had been quietly gathering information, trying to unravel the tangled web Veronica had spun, but now it was too late. Veronica knew everything. Her grip on Charlotte tightened, and with the wedding set for the following day, there was no escape. Veronica's voice cuts through the air like ice, her commands swift and decisive, leaving no room for rebellion. Charlotte feels the walls closing in as she receives the news. The wedding, a contract she had never agreed to but was bound by, was now inevitable. Her attempts to uncover the truth, to find a way out, had only led to more traps. Everything seemed lost as she stares at her reflection in the grand mirror of her room, her face pale, her deep blue eyes brimming with fear. The weight of her hopelessness threatens to consume her. Tomorrow, she would be trapped forever. In a wide shot, the scene of the wedding preparations unfolds in cold, indifferent grandeur. The lavish hall is decorated, the grandeur of the upcoming event completely at odds with the turmoil raging inside Charlotte. The world around her buzzes with activity, but she feels utterly isolated. She watches as her fate is sealed, knowing that by this time tomorrow, she will be tied to a life she never wanted. Nathaniel's figure appears distant and shadowed as he walks through the busy city streets, lost in thought. He had tried to warn her, tried to help, but now he felt powerless. His warm brown eyes, usually filled with quiet determination, were clouded with uncertainty. Had he done enough? Could he have stopped this? He walks faster, his thoughts racing as he tries to think of a solution, but nothing comes. Back in her room, Charlotte sits, her long dark hair cascading over her shoulders as she stares at the wedding dress laid out before her. The pristine white gown felt like a symbol of her defeat. The weight of tomorrow presses down on her, and for the first time, she wonders if there really is no way out. Her heart aches with the finality of it all. The wedding ceremony has just begun, and Charlotte stands at the altar, her face pale and eyes heavy with resignation. She glances around, feeling utterly trapped in a moment she cannot escape. Veronica sits in the front row, watching with a triumphant smile, her plan nearly complete. But then, something unexpected happens. Nathaniel, standing among the guests, steps forward with a calm yet commanding presence. The atmosphere shifts, and all eyes turn to him as he clears his throat, ready to speak. Nathaniel begins to reveal his true identity. The words fall slowly at first, but with each revelation, the weight of his secret becomes clearer. He speaks of his family's lost fortune, how he had once been part of the very world Veronica manipulated, and how he had purposefully hidden his identity. Veronica's expression changes immediately. Her piercing green eyes, once filled with smug satisfaction, now flash with shock and anger. This was not part of her plan. As the ceremony unfolds, Nathaniel calmly continues, connecting all the subtle clues that had been laid out from the start. Each word builds a picture of how Veronica's manipulation had led to her own downfall. He had anticipated every move, using his knowledge of the elite world to undermine her grip on Charlotte. The guests murmur in confusion, and Veronica's control over the room crumbles. Close-up of Veronica as the realization fully hits. Her face is frozen in disbelief, her hands trembling slightly as she grips the edges of her chair. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and elegant dress now seem out of place as her plan falls apart before her. The truth has been exposed, and there's nothing she can do to stop it. Nathaniel turns to Charlotte, his warm brown eyes now filled with reassurance. He had been working to save her all along. The tension melts away, and for the first time in what feels like forever, Charlotte breathes a sigh of relief. The weight of the ceremony lifts, and the future, once dark and uncertain, now seems filled with hope. With Nathaniel's revelations, Veronica's web of manipulation is finally exposed. Once the master of social circles, she now finds herself ostracized and powerless. Her once perfect composure falters as whispers spread throughout the high society she once controlled. No longer able to maintain her influence, her downfall is swift and brutal. Her green eyes, once sharp with control, now reflect bitterness as she is publicly shunned, a fitting end for someone who thrived on manipulation and deceit. Meanwhile, Charlotte feels an overwhelming sense of freedom. No longer under Veronica's shadow, She embraces a life she never thought possible. Together with Nathaniel, she begins a new chapter, filled with hope and the promise of a future built on honesty and love. Her deep blue eyes, which once carried the weight of uncertainty, now shine with determination and resilience. The heavy burden of her past finally lifts, and she can breathe freely. Charlotte and Nathaniel stand side by side, walking away from the chaos that had consumed their lives. Their path forward is not without challenges, but they now face it together, stronger for what they've endured. Nathaniel, once an outcast with hidden strength, now walks with purpose, while Charlotte, no longer bound by fear, steps confidently into the unknown. They both know the future is uncertain, but it is theirs to shape. Veronica, left behind in the world she once ruled, watches from a distance. Her empire crumbles around her, and with no allies left, she is forced into a life of solitude. For the first time, she feels the isolation and insignificance she had inflicted on others. The weight of her choices settles heavily on her shoulders, a bitter reminder of the cost of her ambition. In the final scene, Charlotte and Nathaniel stand on a hill overlooking the horizon. The sky is bright and filled with promise, the perfect contrast to the storm they had weathered together. They hold hands, gazing out at the possibilities ahead, knowing that no matter what comes, they will face it together. Peace settles over them, and for the first time, they feel the full weight of their victory, a future they've earned through love, perseverance, and truth.
This story really moved me with its powerful message of resilience and how redemption can come from the most unexpected places. What about you? How did this story resonate with you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. And if you're ready for another unforgettable journey, just click on the video on your screen. See you there.